Hello, fellow birders. My name is Dennis Kania. Today we're going to be taking a closer look at pine warbler and yellow-throated vireo. On the DuPage Birding Club education channel, we'll be discussing all things bird-related. And as I said, today we'll be taking a closer look at pine warbler versus yellow-throated vireo. So we're going to take a look again at the graphs that show our data collection at Fermilab over the last 33 years. And we can see for pine warbler, most of our sightings begin in mid-April, and by mid-May, generally we're not seeing too many pine warblers. We have had sporadic breeding records of that bird the last 10 years or so. The fall migration starts pretty much in the beginning of September and goes through the month of October. I personally have had pine warblers in my backyard around Thanksgiving, so that takes us all the way to the third week in November, and I'm sure that there are records beyond that. Yellow-throated vireo does not come in quite as early on a regular basis as the pine warbler. Yellow-throated vireos are going to start showing up at the beginning of May. And we have a strong representation of them all through the month of May. And then we do have certainly more breeding records of the vireo than we do of the pine warbler. Migration again picks up in mid-August, and we start having more records. And by the time we get to the end of September, we're pretty much out of yellow-throated vireos for the year. So let's take a first look here at our pine warbler. And the first thing I'd want you to realize is that we have a lot of variability with our pine warblers. All of them are going to have a yellow breast. We can see that yellow even on this very dull first-year female. There's just a little bit of yellow here, a little more here. And then these two cases, there's no streaking at all going on. So not all of our pine warblers are going to have those streaks on the yellow breast. We do see that there's a area of yellow coming off of the throat that wraps up around behind the ear coverts. And so that forms sort of a crescent right here. We do see that on all of these individuals. It's a little more difficult to see on this one, but it is there. Notice that there's an eye ring. You can see that in all three individuals. And then there's an area in front of the eye that is also a bit yellowish, and that's a part of the supercilium. And the term that we would use to describe that would be the supraloral. And so we can see that in this individual, just a smidgen of it there. And because of the angle of the face here, we're not really picking that up. You'll notice that the back of the bird is all olive. And it does have two strong white wing bars. Pay attention to the tertials here. You can see that they're kind of a grayish color in the center and then kind of a pale gray edge to them. So that's noteworthy. There's not really as much contrast as we're going to see on the yellow-throated vireo. Also note the bill. The bill is quite heavy. This is one of the heavier billed warblers that we have. So that will compare well with the vireo. So here's our vireo. Again, we do see that heavy bill right off the bat. That's very noticeable. We can see that the facial pattern is very similar. We do have that eye ring again, that yellow eye ring, but in this case, instead of that area that's in front of the eye, instead of it being a part of the supercilium called the supraloral, it's actually the lower itself that is yellow. And so you can see that's a little lower than what we saw, but still gives you a very similar appearance. And so for comparison's sake, that's something that would look very much the same for those two birds. Again, it has strong white wing bars that we saw on the pine warbler. But notice that even though the back starts out in the mantle as olive, it does then change to a slate gray. So the scapulars are gray. And if we could see all the way down the back, we'd see that the lower back and the upper tail coverts are also all that same gray color. I'd like to point out that the feet of these birds are blue. And you'll find that all of our North American vireos have blue feet. So now let's do a direct comparison of the two species. Again, reviewing those characteristics I had mentioned, we see all these similarities with the yellow throat, yellow breast. We see that here as well. We see this pattern in the face with the eye ring, and then in this case, the supraloral, and in this case, an eye ring with a yellow lore. So that gives a very similar appearance. They both have the strong white wing bars. And there the comparisons start to break down. So in the case of the pine warbler, we have the all olivey back. In the case of the vireo, we see that the scapulars are gray, the back is gray all the way down to the upper tail coverts being gray. I had mentioned earlier that the tertials don't have a lot of contrast going on. You have these dark gray centers and then light gray edges to those tertials. Whereas if we look at the tertials on the vireo, the centers are a darker gray or almost black, and then the outer edges are wider and they're also white. And so you get this very bold patterning here. It's a lot of contrast going on and very, very noticeable. Another feature that's different on the vireo would be the fact that the tail has white outer edges to it, which are lacking on the pine. So when comparing these two, keep in mind that pine warblers can be quite variable in the amount of yellow on the breast as well as the amount of streaking. Pine warblers do have a heavy bill, which compares quite favorably with yellow-throated vireo. But what you want to make sure is that you look for that hook on the end of the bill of the vireo. Yellow-throated vireo has gray scapulars on the lower back and rump, where those areas would all be olive on the pine warbler. Yellow-throated vireo has tertials that are strongly edged in white. You don't get that kind of contrast on a pine warbler. Yellow-throated vireo has white outer edges to the tail, which are lacking on pine warbler. And once again, all of our North American vireos have blue feet, and you should check that out this spring. You'll be surprised to find that it's true. So thanks for taking the time to view this video. Hopefully we have given you some bird food for thought. I hope you'll join us again in the future as we explore all things bird related.